All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're looking at a huge story that's playing out almost completely behind the scenes. It's what we're calling the Silver Crisis Trilogy. Think of it like a three-act play that follows a very specific historical pattern. And if that pattern holds, well, we could be looking at a major global event for one of the world's most critical resources. This quote really says it all. This isn't some pie in the sky prediction for 10 years down the road. It's about a bunch of things happening right now that on their own might not seem like much. A solar company in Germany suddenly can't get supplies. A defense contractor in the US is quietly hoarding. Refineries in Asia are just stopping contracts. Individually, it's just noise. But when you put it all together, it starts to look like a crisis that's already started.
So, the whole idea we're digging into here is that there's a predictable script that plays out before every big resource crisis. It's happened before, and the source material argues that it's happening again, right now, with silver. We can actually see the different phases unfolding. And this is the roadmap. Right here. It's a three-phase pattern. It always starts with phase one, silent accumulation. This is where the smart money, we're talking governments, huge corporations, they start buying up all the physical supply they can, very quietly. Then comes phase two, export restrictions, where countries start to wall off their own supplies. And it all ends in phase three, price controls and rationing. That's when the shortage is out in the open and the markets start to break.
Okay, so here's the game plan. We're going to walk through each part. First, we'll dive into that silent accumulation phase. Then we'll look at the supply lockdown. After that, we'll get into the end game. And finally, we'll tackle what the source calls the inescapable squeeze. All right, let's kick things off with phase one, silent accumulation. This is the stage where the big players quietly start stockpiling. They're systematically taking the physical stuff off the market long before the general public has any idea there's a problem. So you gotta ask, who's actually doing all this buying? Well, look at the moves being made. China, which uses a massive amount of the world's silver, just suddenly stopped telling anyone how much it's importing. India's imports just hit a 38-year high, and they're calling it a strategic military asset now. And Russia? They've completely stopped exporting their silver and are stuffing it all into their own government vaults. These aren't just market trends. These are calculated, strategic decisions. And this sets up a really stark contrast, a huge difference in strategy. You've got these major world powers hoarding all the physical silver they can get their hands on. And then you have the United States, which has been doing the complete opposite. They've been betting on the paper market, financial contracts, while everyone else was focused on getting the actual physical metal. And what did that strategy get them? Well, you're looking at it. Zero. A big, fat zero. The source says the U.S. completely sold off its entire strategic stockpile of silver. While other countries were buying it up, America was selling every single ounce.
And listen, it's not just countries. You know it's serious when the big corporations start making moves like this. Giants like Tesla, Samsung, First Solar, they're not even bothering with the open market anymore. They're going straight to the source, signing deals directly with the mines to lock in their supply for years. That is a massive red flag that they see a huge shortage coming.
So all this quiet buying, it was never going to stay quiet forever. It naturally leads us right into phase two, the supply lockdown. This is where the stockpiling goes public, and countries start putting up walls to protect what they have. The global market starts to fracture. And look, this isn't some new playbook. We have seen this movie before time and time again. Remember the OPEC oil embargo in '73? Or when China basically held the world hostage over rare earth metals in 2010? Indonesia did it with tin in 2013. History shows this is just what nations do when they want to control a critical resource. And the source material is clear. This isn't some what-if scenario. It's happening right now. Russia has already banned exports to countries it doesn't like. Mexico, the biggest silver producer on the planet, has started putting quotas on how much can leave the country. And maybe most telling of all, banks in South Korea have apparently just stopped selling physical silver because they literally can't get their hands on it. Okay, so where does all this lead? It leads to the third and final act, the end game. This is the moment everything tips over. The physical shortage becomes so obvious that nobody can deny it anymore, and the system starts to panic. The illusion of an infinite supply of paper contracts gets shattered by the hard reality of empty vaults. Just look at this chart of the COMEX registered silver inventories. I mean, this says it all. This is the actual physical silver that's available for delivery. It has absolutely cratered.
from over 100 million ounces just a few years ago to less than 40 million today. To put that in perspective, that's barely enough to cover a few weeks of what the world's industries use. So that's the big question, isn't it? What happens when the shelves are bare, when all the industries and all the investors are demanding physical silver, but there's just none left to deliver? What does the system do then? Well, we don't really have to guess. History tells us exactly what happens when a physical market breaks down like this. First, trading just stops. Then, the exchanges tell everyone, sorry, we can't give you the metal, but here's some cash instead. Then, governments jump in with price controls to stop the panic, which of course just makes things worse. And finally, they start rationing. The military and critical industries get what's left, and everyone else is out of luck. By the way, if you're getting value out of this breakdown, do us a huge favor and hit that like, share, and subscribe button. That way, you won't miss what's coming next. And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, what our source calls the inescapable squeeze. And the argument here is that this time, it's different. This silver crisis isn't like other resource shortages we've seen, because for silver, there's really no escape hatch. See, the root of the problem is actually in the ground itself. It's basic geology. As you can see here, a whopping 70% of all new silver is just a byproduct. It only comes out of the ground when we're mining for other stuff, like zinc, copper, or lead. You can't just decide to flip a switch and mine more silver. And this is the real kicker. All the usual ways you'd solve a shortage like this, they just don't apply here. The supply is what economists call inelastic. You can't just make more. Recycling is incredibly inefficient. We only get back a tiny fraction. There are no good substitutes for what silver does in high-tech electronics. And here's the biggest one. Demand is basically mandated by law. All these green energy initiatives legally require silver, so industries have to buy it no matter how high the price goes. Think about it like this. Back in '73, with the oil crisis, it was bad. But eventually, new oil from places like the North Sea came online and eased the pressure. For this looming silver crisis, the source argues there's nothing like that on the horizon. There's no cavalry coming to the rescue. And that really gets to the heart of the message here. The time to pay attention isn't when this story is plastered all over the front page of every newspaper, because by then, the game is already over. The physical metal will be gone, and the window to do anything about it will have slammed shut. So we're going to end this right back where we started, with a big question for you. We've just walked through that classic three-phase pattern: the silent buying, the supply lockdown, and the final endgame. The evidence we've looked at suggests the first two phases aren't just predictions anymore, they're already happening. So the only thing left to ask is what comes next. And are you prepared for it?